We've been studying a sugya that last week I tried to summarize the sugya of Dichui. When there is a problem with a mitzvah and it's being overridden, it's for a temporary period of time unusable. It is not, you're not able to do the mitzvah because of some technical reason related, in most cases, to the object with which you were going to perform the mitzvah. Can the mitzvah come back online after the fact? And what about something that never was actually a mitzvah object, that was unable to serve a mitzvah purpose, and then you made it able to do so? So we have two possible cases: nire v'nidche, where it was worthy, it could work, and then it became unworthy. It was pushed off, nidche, and then now can you bring that back up online? As opposed to dichui me'ikara. Dichui me'ikara was overridden or pushed away initially, something inherent about it that prevented it from being a mitzvah object. That's the basic idea. Now, what I want to see tonight is two things. One is to look at an essay written up based on the notes of Rav Soloveitchik, where he talks about the issue of Dichui. And I just thought it was, Kedarko, it's a beautiful formulation that will help us to understand some of the ideas behind the scenes. We're not going to do the mechanics of the Gemara again. I'm just going to take it as a given now, as a baseline, that you remember what we learned, that you reviewed it. Hopefully it'll come back to you if you didn't remember from last week and 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. So it'll come back to you as we're looking at this on the screen. I'm going to put it up on the screen. And what the Rav tries to do is wants to engage initially Rashi's approach, then part of Tosfot's approach. We'll look at this mama, this section. If there's time, which I think there will be, I do want to learn the Tosfot on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, the Tosfot Dibur Hamatchil Nektam Erev Yom Tov Altabot Tamra B'Yom Tov Mahu. That's on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, which I was going to do last time, but then I realized until we get to the end of the sugya on Lamed Gimel Amud Bet, it's kind of pointless to learn that Tosfot. It presupposes that you have a picture of everything that takes place on the surface. So let me put it up on the screen. Join with me in the Harei Kedem, notes written up by Rabbi Michal Shurkin of Shiurim by Rav Soloveitchik. There are other iterations of the notes of Rav Soloveitchik of his various Shiurim. This is just an accessible one, so I share it with you. It's Binyan Dichui Eitzel Mitzvah. That's our sugya, the sugya of what happens when the mitzvah is overridden, thrown out, suspended, whatever language you want to use. Now, I'm going to kind of help us to go through it, and please feel free. You have to raise your hand or write something in the chat to get my attention, because I don't see the screens now. I just see the sheet from the Harei Kedem itself. So here we go. So this is an explanation. What exactly is the issue? What's the complexity that we're trying to unpack? The Gemara Sukka Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph Tane Ula Bar Chinana Nektam Rosh V'Altabot Tamra Kasha. This is straight out of the Gemara, right? The sugya is that the top was lopped off, and then there's a bud that grew over the top of it so to close it up. And the statement is that it's kosher. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, Nektam Rosh Me'erev Yom Tov V'Altabot Tamra B'Yom Tov Mahu. So the question, Rabbi Yirmiyah, which animates the rest of the sugya, we talked about it last time and the time before, so I'm not reviewing the whole thing, but the question in one sentence is, if this happened on Erev Yom Tov and the fix came on Yom Tov, is that kosher? So in other words, when Yom Tov started, it was not kosher to be used as a hadas, and some point on Yom Tov, the tamra, the covering over through this bud, transpired, and did it render it kosher or not? So, yesh dichu etzel mitzvot olo. That's the question on 33a, the discussion of much of the Gemara. Is there dichu etzel mitzvot, or is there no dichu etzel mitzvot? Once it's pushed off, can it come back, or is it too late? Now, Rashi, Rav Shurkin gives you Rashi longhand. You can look it up on the page. Dibur Hamatchil yesh dichu etzel mitzvot. You can just look over here with me and see it here. Upirish Rashi Sham B'Dibur Hamatchil yesh dichui etzel mitzvot. Klomar noheget Torah dichui etzel mitzvot keshem shenoheget etzel korbanot. The opinion that holds that there is such a thing as dichui etzel mitzvot presupposes that the notion, the concept of dichui with regard to mitzvot is just as there is such a concept that we know about in the world of korbanot. The imnir eit v'nidchet mishenishchata amarti dached tu la hadar chazi. So if something was near 8, meaning it was possible to be used, and then it was disqualified, overridden from the time period of the shechita, we say it is pushed off for good. De tu lo hadar chazi. It is no longer going to be appropriate. It is not going to any longer be usable. And Rav Soloveitchik asks, V'tzarech biur, we have to explain this. Mehechi teiti, the din dichui noeg bekadshim tfei mikol mitzvot. How do we know that the concept of dichui transpires with regard to kadshim, meaning the world of korbanot, more so than the rest of the mitzvot? That's the question, right? It takes it as a given, right? With regard to korbanot, if it's nired v'nidchet, from the time that it was nishchat, no good anymore. Explains Rav Soloveitchik. V'nira habir b'zeh. The explanation would seem to be as follows: De bekadshim diyesh chavtza shel korban v'chalot kedushat hakrava hadichui chal al guf hakedusha she'ena kedusha hareuya likarev. In kadshim, the realm of korbanot, there's an object which is itself the korban. There is a status upon that object, and it is the status of sanctification for the purpose of offering it. Once there is a dichui, that dichui, the override, comes upon the guf hakedusha. That is no longer, now there's some impact on the sanctity of this object, this animal. It's going to otherwise would have been nikrav. It is now no longer a kedusha hareuya likarev. V'chal chalot psul ala chavtza shel hakadshim. There is a psul, there's a nullification on the object of the kadshim. Kadshim, the whole realm of korbanot. Aval mitzvot, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, ein lahem chalot miyucheret shel chavtza shel mitzvah. But when it comes to mitzvahs, the truth is, they don't have a particular chalot. They don't have a status that obtains for them of a chavtza shel mitzvah. Rather, just understand what he means. Obviously, we know there are mitzvah objects. So what does he mean? There's no status. The status means ella, rather. Min hadas ve'arava have a min sheyesh bo mitzvah netila. These are species, the hadasim, the aravot. They're species that we have a mitzvah to pick up from this species, right? But the object itself, you don't raise it up, like you would with a korban, which you don't raise, but you designate that korban. I'm makdish this sheep. I'm going to give it as a korban, a nedava. Done. But even if you did that with the hadas and the arava, you're not giving it a kedusha. It's not going to have inherent kedusha unless you give it to the hekdesh, in which case you can't use it for the mitzvah. So, min hadas v'arava have a min. It's a species. Sheyesh bo mitzvat netila, upon which on this species the mitzvah to raise it up, meaning in the mitzvah itself. V'harei al atze hamin shel hadalit minim lo shayach d'chiyah klal. With regard to the species themselves, you can't make a generic statement that the whole species of hadassim or ravot is off limits. And that's the question. V'zeu shenistapka b'gemara im yesh dichui etzel mitzvot o lo. Is there such thing as dichui with regard to mitzvot as opposed to korbanot? In korbanot, a korban means an object, usually an animal. It could also technically be a meal, offering, grain, but let's stick with animals. That's actually really more where it obtains. In kadshim, you have designated this animal, it's going to be a korban. It has a certain status now. It's not yours. It's something you've consecrated. So if something happens to it, the object, in terms of its ability to serve as something that would go up on the mizbech, is tarnished, it's ruined, it's wrecked, it's pushed away. But that's the shaila of the Gemara. Does that obtain when it comes to mitzvahs, where the object obviously becomes a chavtza shel mitzvah once you use it, the sukkah once you use it, but you haven't done the mitzvah yet? That's the whole case. Remember, it's all happening before Yontif, then on Yontif, but then you want to raise up. Everyone agrees. If you wake up in the morning, first day of Sukkot, and the top is lopped off, you can't make a bracha on it. Too bad. Second day, third, doesn't matter. Can't do it. But on the beginning of Yontif, from Erev Yontif to on Yontif, Erev Yontif, it got lopped off. Then night of Yontif, or in the morning early, it grew back to Tarma. You wake up in the morning, wow, it's there. That's the shaila. Is there such a thing as Dichui Eitzel Mitzvot or Lo? Ki kshenektam Rosho, ve'eno hadar, because when the top is lopped off and it's no longer beautiful, doesn't have that status of beauty that it requires of being whole. So ein bezeh chalo din psul bahadas. It's not actually like a halacha about the hadas that it is puzzle, because it's not really a mitzvah object yet. I haven't actually made a bracha on it. It's simply not a hadas that's yet worthy of being used for raising it up. V'al kain lo shayach bo dichui, and therefore there's no concept here of dichui. You can't speak about dichui of something unless it actually obtained a status. Until the moment that you lift it up and you make a bracha, it's just some piece of vegetation. Now, I will mention this presupposes, the Rav is going to get into this next, or later on, I should say. This is not the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that you need a bundle that you can't properly tie on Yontif. You have to tie it before Yontif. So you did make some kind of an object, and we'll see soon. There's some questions here, but so they're saying, look, the mainstream view, let's say of Rabbanan, that you don't need an eged. You could make an eged. It's a nice idea. It's a mitzvah because it's beautification. But just before Yontif, there's no mitzvah object here. Therefore, can you really speak about dichui? Can you say the fact that you're thinking about using it in the future? We discussed already that when it comes to mitzvahs, hazman alav milta doesn't really obtain until you've used it for that purpose. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says that's the question. That's what it means. This is the question. Dichui etzel mitzvot olo. Is there a situation of dichui or not? Okay. Let me pause right here. Questions, comments before I go to the next section.
So I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Sully.
Sully, go ahead. I didn't hear who it was. Sully, did you unmute?
Mark has a question.
Oh, Mark. Okay, sorry. Mark, go ahead.
I'm not sure I really see the difference. I mean, if I walked into Rosenblum's the week before Pesach and started throwing lulavim and hadassim on the floor, I mean, they've already been sort of established as being something that's going to be used for mitzvah. Much
before Pesach, you did this.
I'm sorry?
Before Pesach or before Sukkot?
I'm sorry, before Sukkot. So I'm not sure I see.
Okay, so the point is, in your mind and my mind, we say, well, that's a lulav, that's a dasim and a ravut. Absolutely true. But from a halachic vantage point, does it have any actual status?
Doesn't it have status from the time it's chopped down and presented as being used?
Right. No, that's the point. No. That's the chiddush. As opposed to an animal where the act of consecration is part of the process, and the very fact that you've consecrated it means that now it is subject to the possibility that it could become overridden in terms of its sanctity and no longer usable. And if that happens, that you can't fix. Okay, so is the world of korbanot, it's separate magisteria, or is it a template that teaches us about mitzvot generally? That's kind of the question going on. Follow?
That's the
Wait, Mark, is that satisfactory? You're still tumbling about it?
Oh, well, yeah, it's fine. Let me think about it.
Okay. I mean, this is the Rabbanan's view. We're going to come back to Rabbi Yehuda shortly.
Yeah,
in Rab's piece here, you'll see he's also going to engage.
Fine. You answer my question.
Larry, go ahead.
At what point does a behema or mincha, solet, become consecrated?
At the time of declaration that I designate it as such.
So if someone in the Galil is bringing solet or a behema or ofo to Yerushalayim, and something bad happened to them, and then by the time he arrived at the Kohen, the imperfection cured itself. Could that korban be brought?
That is the question. And the basic answer is no. That's the basic answer, no. But is that really true? That's the Rav's point. When Rashi said that there's a question, is there Dichui etzel mitzvot or not? And Rashi, Dibur HaMatchil, Yesh Dichui etzel mitzvot, it's about a quarter of the way down the page in Rashi in 33a, he said, what is the question? Is there such a thing as Dichui etzel mitzvot? the same way there is such a thing, Eitzel Korbanot. Because with regard to Korbanot, if it was something, exactly your case, you designated the cow, you start walking it down from the Galil, it got a blemish, that would be a disqualifying blemish, it healed itself, near Venidchet, so that's it. It's not this, it can't be fixed. It's done. Now, I will point out, Rashi here points out it's Mishanishchata. But we're going to see soon, if we get to Tosfot, although I will get there, that there are many cases that are not that way, that there's something about the way you consecrated it or something about its status that obviates the possibility it could be used as a korban, no matter what.
Is another way of asking the question regarding Arba Minim is, at what time are the Arba Minim mukdash?
Right. And this kind of Mark's question from before, like you see what it looks like in Rosenblum's. It's not there for stam decoration of gardens. It's Erev Sukkos and it's sitting there and it's in bundles and little bags that say Hadassim on them. So you want to argue, well, it's not really for Hadassim. He's right and you're right. The difference is that it hasn't yet been used for its mitzvah purpose. And until that's happened, it's not clear that it has any status as such. Ergo, if something happens to it that would disqualify temporarily, maybe it can come back online. Or do you say, no, it's just like a korban, knocked off line?
Is it putting in the eged?
Hold on. The eged is only a must for Rabbi Yehuda. We do not pass like Rabbi Yehuda.
Okay, thank you.
I mentioned before, it's now we finished the first section. Your question's a good one, that Rav Soloveitchik himself has to dial back, say, okay, what's going on in the world of Rabbi Yehuda? Because he does think that there's an object that's being made. He thinks that it's essential that there be an eged. So just like it's essential that you build the sukkah before sukkah. If it's already young, you can't build the sukkah. So when you build the sukkah, does it have any status? It's just a little hut until you finally make a bracha in it. That's a discussion as well. We'll come back to it.
Yeah,
I hope we get that far.
It's not clear with the Arba Minim when you, quote, cross the line.
Right. Rabbanan seem to hold that it's when you make the bracha the first time. But Rabbi Yehuda would argue, lav davka. It's really when you make the eged, maybe. We'll see it inside.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So, and here we have it right here. Beshitat Rashi shadichu mishat eged. Rashi has a position here that he thinks the dichui, if there is dichui, it would happen at the time of the actual making of the bundle. According to the opinion, and again, it's not resolved, right? Our Gemara sort of ended with, is there dichui mitzvot? Is there not? Not so sure, not so clear, right? Maybe only l'chumra, but not l'kula, right? Pirish Rashi. Va'altad bo tamra biyomtiv mishenegad, and if it grew, the tamra, the bud grew on yomtiv after it was already made into an eged. Debatalush nami salkabe, because even when it's, the hadas is no longer attached to the ground, it could still be a resulting tamra that grows on the tip that was lopped off from the top of the hadas. Rashi gives you a little bit of botany on it. Don't think that the fact that it grew back means that it was still attached on Yom Tov, because it was still attached when Yom Tov started. You can't cut it on Yom Tov out from the ground. That you for sure can't do. That's kotzer. So he wants you to know, don't be surprised. Yes, it's possible, even though it was cut off from the ground, that the top can still close up with the tamra. But he writes here that the tamra came on Yom Tov after the eged was already made. V'lich ora, writes Rabbi Soloveitchik, or writes Rav Shurkin, the name of Rav Soloveitchik, V'lich ora tzarach biur. Lama, it would seem that we have to understand this. Lama pirish Rashi da'dicho ha mishenega davka. Why is it specifically for Rashi that it had to have already been tied in a bundle? And furthermore, I mean, it's strange that Rashi tried to explain the side of the argument that would argue that there is a concept of Dichui Eitzel mitzvot. Why did that presuppose they hold that side holds like Rabbi Yehuda? We paskin like the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say that you don't need an eged. Follow? Rashi took as a given, if you want to say that there's Dichui Eitzel mitzvot, so then it must be, I don't know what that was, then it must be that the Tamra happened on Yom Tov, that it grew, Mishan Egad, that it was already made in a bundle. When? From before Yom Tov. So before Yom Tov, you made the bundle, and then the top lopped off, and then on Yantif, it grew back. That's what it would seem. And we have to understand this because, wait a second, why did Rashi say that the Dichui is Mishanega Davka, right? And furthermore, we follow the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan hold the lulav just doesn't need an eged. So if the lulav doesn't really need an eged, so why is that even germane? Explains Rabbi Soloveitchik. V'nira de ayin berashi lahalan b'dibur amatchil v'lulav misukka lo yalif. Further along, there is a discussion in the Gemara where there's a break between the world of lulav and the world of sukkah. Initially, the Gemara wants to say maybe you could connect one to the other, learn one from the other, and there's a tasav and an asui problem with regard to the dalad minam, right? Remember, you can't burrow in a haystack to make your sukkah. And if tasav and asui applies to lulav, then if you make your bundle and one of the species is not kosher, and then it grows in, so you didn't make the bundle now. The bundle was made, and now it came into existence to be a kosher bundle. Lights were flipped on when it fixed itself. That's tasav and asui. So the Gemara had said, no. V'lulav misukah lo yalif. Don't learn it that way. What did Rashi say there? B'hai denaki pluktayo b'miatan b'yomtiv mishum destama bater de'agdehu. The fact that we learned that their dispute is when it's on Yontif that you picked off. It was the other case with the berries. There are too many berries that grew on it, too many anavim. You picked them off by diminishing the number. There are now more leaves than berries. Now it's kosher again. So Vahai, this Rashi had explained it. It must be that it's a case where it was after you made the eged. That must be the case. Because you can't make the eged on Yontif. If you don't need an eged. So it's leminkat biyomtov. Then you would have to learn that this whole thing was happening on Yomtov itself. Mishum de'ilo de kidesh hayom akati lo chalalei zman mitzvah v'lo shem mitzvah lemikraye dichui. And here, your point, Larry, your point, Mark, comes right back into the foreground in Rashi. Rashi says, in order to have this discussion, in order to entertain the possibility of there being Dichui Eitzel Mitzvot, we need to presuppose that there had to have been a bundle that was made before Yontif and not on Yontif. Can't tie the bundle on Yontif altogether. So if the bundle doesn't mean anything, if the bundle is just a nice way to store the three species that really, even though it looks like they're tied together, they have no relationship to each other till the next day when you pick it up to make the bracha on it. So there's no zman mitzvah, there's no shame mitzvah. So then, okay, so you picked off the berries, now it's all good. But if you made an eged, if you made a bundle before Yontif, and if the bundle, because you made an object, regardless of whether it was essential or not, you made the object, meaning you didn't just go to the store and buy the stuff. You assembled the stuff and you said to yourself, whether verbally or just mentally, I'm tying this up so that tomorrow morning when it's Yontif, when I can tie it up, it's going to be so simple, so beautiful. I'll pick it up, I'll pick up the etrog and I'll do the mitzvah and I'm done. The fact that you took that step before Yontif indicates that maybe on a certain level, you are investing it with mitzvah, a name of a mitzvah, a status of a mitzvah in advance of the moment when you're going to use it, maybe many hours in advance. Ira, see your hand. Give me another minute. So here's how the Rav unpacks it. I'm reading it now inside. I just told it to you outside. Umavur b'Rashi. It is explained here from Rashi. D'im yesh dichui etzel mitzvot. If there's such a thing as dichui, as pushing off mitzvahs, maybe permanently, in fact, hatamu mipnei shechal al hadas chalot chavta shal mitzvah shem mitzvah. That is only possible if the hadas has a status of mitzvah object before it's ever been used. Dal kain shayach bo dichui, because then there would be such a thing as dichui. V'zeu k'mo shenemar de dichui shayach rak shesh chalot v'chavtza shel hechser de shayach diachol Torah dichui. You can only speak about the word dichui, about overriding a status of an object, if the object has status. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says that according to Rashi, this case must be where the fellow made an eged, whether according to Rabbi Yehuda, where it's essential, or maybe even according to the Rabbana, where it's not essential. We saw the Gemara last time on 33b. It's a mitzvah to do it, but if you didn't do it, it's not essential. But why is it a mitzvah? Okay, but if you did the mitzvah, and the mitzvah was, I made an object of mitzvah for tomorrow morning. Okay, so now there's a possibility of talking about an object that has the potential for dichui, v'kodshim, dehem chefza shel korban, v'yeshlem kedushat hakrava. Since those objects, the object of the korban has the kedusha, something that is going to be offered. Pshita lahagemara d'shayach b'hem dechia. It's obvious in the world of kodshim that there's such thing as dechia. Aval b'mitzvot, but when it comes to mitzvot, not kodshim, but other mitzvah objects, they're not being offered as offering consecrated to hekdesh, etc. But they're mitzvah. They're obviously going to use in a mitzvah. Shakli v'tari, shakli v'taria. The questions and answers going back and forth. There's debate. Im shayach bahem chalot shel dechia. Is this such a thing as dechia? Is it not a thing as dechia? Aval hatzadi yesh dichui etzel mitzvah. According to the view that holds yes, just like in korbanot, so too there is dichui etzel mitzvot. Hanim shum shegam lemitzvot yesh shem mitzvah. There is an object, right, that has a status. Yeshem mitzvah miha. Veheve chefza shal mitzvah. V'shayach behu Torah dichui. Yes, there's such a thing as a mitzvah status to this object, even before he'd ever used it. And therefore, there is the possibility, or at least a debate, and a very strong likelihood that something happened to cancel it. Maybe that can't be fixed. Maybe that can't be fixed, right? Now, umehai time is svar Rashi. Dilari, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the lulav tzarich aged, chalot shem, that you need a bundling, essential. Chalot shem lulav shel mitzvah chayil alei kvar me'erev yom tov misha shenegad. According to the Rabbi Yehuda's view, the fact that you need a bundle and you can't tie the bundle properly on Yom Tov, you have to tie it before Yom Tov, means that once you tied it, you did an action that showed, I have a mitzvah object now. It's not just some issues. Lu'umadze, there's some issuances from the ground. Lu'umadze, compared to that, the Rabbanan Bluv Ein Sarich Eged, the Rabbanan hold you don't need the bundle. Losagi be'eged, la'ashvei shem lulav shel mitzvah. It's not going to be enough. Even if you tied it together, there's no lulav of mitzvah. When is it a lulav of mitzvah? When you make the bracha on it, you actually do the mitzvah. V'tzorch sheyakadesh alav hayom kedei la'ashvuye lulav shel mitzvah. Oh, excuse me, Rabbi Soloveitchik. This is a chiddush of the Rav. Sorry, the Rav added something in here. Excuse me. He says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the moment you made the bundle, you made an object of mitzvah. According to the Rabbanan, Rashi's view, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, is what it means, is that you made the bundle before Yontif, and the moment you were Makadesh the day, now it became a mitzvah, a chesed shel mitzvah. So it became a lulav shel mitzvah. In other words, Rabbi Soloveitchik's understanding of Rashi is that Rashi accommodates the possibility of dichui etzel mitzvot, both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to the Rabbanan. They'll just have a different moment when they'll say, now this object is an object of mitzvah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the making of the bundle, 2:00 in the afternoon, or as Mark pointed out, I'm drawing off his example. You go to the bookstore, it was 2 days before Yom Tov, but someone made the bundle, they put it in. Okay, you have a mitzvah object now. You put it all, let's say you assembled it, that day. But according to the Rabbanan, you made that bundle, it wasn't essential. But once Yom Tov started, now you have a mitzvah object. If you presuppose that, that would be the side that says, since we have a mitzvah object, now something happened to it, so maybe it is taka dichui etzel mitzvot. If you say we have nothing here, then for sure ain't dichui etzel mitzvot, at least when it comes to the mitzvah of lulav as such, right? Okay, let me pause here. Ira, you were waiting patiently. I don't know if I answered your question or not. I see Mark's waiting.
No,
too.
so my question is, when the time that it's the lulav is the mitzvah is when you say asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu al natila lulav, and then
Yes.
you say the first day shachiyanu. So you're sanctifying the fact that it's a mitzvah to
Right.
do that. Prior to that, there is no mitzvah with the lulav.
Yeah,
Correct?
but that's what's being said here. Just like in the world of korbanot, where you designate this is going to be for a korban. Maybe the fact that you did an action, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the action itself, now made into a mitzvah object even before it was ever used. That's a major chiddush. But according to Rashi, says Rav Soloveitchik, that's the only thing you could imagine. Rashi must hold that because Rashi's trying to explain how is there any discussion about dichui etzel mitzvot based on what you're saying, Ira. You're saying there's no discussion. Until I make the bracha, I have flowers in my greenhouse and plants. I go in the morning of, and they're not attached to the ground. I can't cut them, but I pick up hadassim from hadassim pail, and I take my aravas, and there's the lulav stand. I pick out a lulav. I put them together. I open the box. I pull out my etrog. Now I have a mitzvah. Now this object is vested mitzvah, kedusha mitzvah. That's true, and you're correct. The Rav was trying to understand, what is Rashi doing? Why is Rashi drawing the parallel right away to the world of korbanot? How does Rashi see a parallel there? Prima facie, when you look at this comparison, you're not comparing apples to apples. One is a world of kachim, separate magisterium. It's a whole section of Shas where the words matter differently, where the status of the object takes on a certain sanctity automatically, with all sorts of nafkamina if it can't be offered. But when it comes to mitzvahs, I thought, exactly as you're saying, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, I thought that these objects are nothing beforehand. But what he constructed based on his understanding of Rashi, what the Rav understood in Rashi, is that what Rashi's truly saying, and that's why Rashi's throwing in about a bundling. What do you bring in a bundling? Isn't the bundling only necessary according to Rabbi Yehuda? The bundle's the whole thing. Because if you just had these things in your greenhouse and they're in separate vases and you're picking them out, they're all picked before. They're not attached to the ground, of course. But on Yom Tov, you just pick them up, you put them together, and then you mitzvah. Good, done. But you didn't have anything before. Before they were just flowers among the flowers. But no, let me finish. Hold on, Mark, you're next. The idea that Rashi harped on, there's an eged here. The Rav said, why is that? Doesn't it sound just like Rabbi Yehuda? Oh, wait. Even the Rabbanan hold that it's a mitzvah, even though it's not essential aspect of fulfillment of Daled Mina, but it's a mitzvah because of Zek Kelev and Veil. So what is it about the eged that's special? I thought it's only special for everybody. But in one case, because it's a good thing to do, it's an enhancement. In another case, it's actually essential for the mitzvah of Daled Minim. Fine. But why do you group them together and just talk about Eged? Answers Rabbi Soloveitchik, because actually what Rashi is saying is the only way there can be a question here about Dichui is if you have enough of a mitzvah object, not just that you thought in your head, in my refrigerator, I have a bundle of hadassim and a bundle of aravim and some lulavim, I'm going to grab some and take them. But that before Yont, if you did an action, that was a unifying action here. That was a designating action. It was what Mark was saying. We walked into the bookstore, but more than that, you took the objects and you tied them together before Yontif. Now something happened to before Yontif, is missing part of that das. Now Yontif started. So another question. So says Rabbi Soloveitchik, what Rashi's driving at is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the minute you made the bundle, you had a chefetz shel mitzvah, and therefore we have a real question: is there dichui etzel mitzvah? Could be. According to the Rabbanan, how's there dichui etzel mitzvah? Well, when Yontif started, that's what turned on the lights on that chefetz shel mitzvah. Yeah, I could give you another example. It's not exactly parallel, but we have this issue also with a sukkah. There's a whole sugya. Is there, first of all, mitzvah to build a sukkah or not? That's a sugya. Not so clear that it's not. Some say that it is, and that maybe the shachiyanu, the first night, is actually on the building of the sukkah. We actually learned that sugya on Sukkot way back when. Number one. Number two, once Yontif starts, you can't touch the decorations anymore on the wall. Why not? Well, because it's part of the mitzvah sukkah.
Mitzvah sukkah, yeah.
Okay, what if it's before anyone ever said leisei b'sukkah? Can you do it then? No, the mitzvah didn't start yet. Oh, Yontif started, and that's the onset of the kedusha of this object of mitzvah. It's not a one-to-one parallel, because you could argue against me and say, yeah, but the hadassim ravat, and lulav's not the bracha till the morning. This is going to be at that night. It's like the mitzvah's already on. Not a perfect analogy, but the idea that there could be like the onset of Yontif is something in and of itself. Yeah. Okay, Mark. Good enough, Ira?
Schach.
Okay, good enough. Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah.
So that was my question on the sukkah, which is, to something be eligible for dichui, does it have to be inherent in the actual object? So let's take the sukkah example, because that's what I was thinking of. The wind comes and blows the schach off the top. So now you have an invalid sukkah. But then the wind comes and puts it back on top. So is that a case of dichui where now you say, hey, the schach is back and I can use the sukkah? Because once it's invalid, if the schach blows back on, it would be. But that's not intrinsic in the actual object like it would be with the korban or with the hadassim.
With hadassim.
So but yet it still seems like it's a case of something becoming invalid,
Right.
But it's not inherent. It's not something growing on
Right.
its own.
So, and I know you're going to be frustrated by my answer, but this was a subject that we did cover like really super in depth sometime last year. It's a very involved sugya.
I'll go back to the
okay.
videos.
The practical reality is that if the non-Jew throws it back up for you, then it probably could work. But
I'm
there
talking
are
about the
certain
meat.
questions there about Tasavum Na'asui and possibly also about Dichui.
Okay, all right.
There,
I'll
there,
go
there,
back
there is
and-
possibly a
Which-
question there. Yeah.
Which section is it in?
Excuse
fine.
me.
Chapter 1, chapter 2.
Okay, I'll find it.
Benny, right of reply before Larry asks this question?
Question regarding this whole, the mitzvah stated in the Torah is V'kachtem lachem v'li'etz hadar, etc. So the mitzvah would seem to me to be fulfilled the moment you took these various species, the full species. And so the only reason you're making a bracha is to concentrate on mind that I'm performing the mitzvah. But it seems to me, I have an issue when you start collecting the, not even making it to an eged, you still have, in a sense, fulfilled the mitzvah that the Torah commands you to do. So I'm not sure that there's a Dichui in this regard. You know, somehow, I don't know, maybe there's a defect in the etrog or in the lulav or something that possible did for doing the mitzvah, but the fact that you took the objects asked for by the Torah would imply that you are in fact
Okay.
fulfilling the mitzvah.
Right. You're making a good point. Rabbi Soloveitchik's trying to understand, why does Rashi need an eged? Why does he keep bringing it up when we all know that the eged is not essential according to the Rabbanan?
Okay.
It would
Yeah.
seem, Rabbi Soloveitchik's understanding of Rashi is that it was not enough for Rashi. The words "lekachtem lachem" really only obtain when you take the four of them derech gedilatan
Right.
and on the day of the fulfillment of the mitzvah, not before at all. Therefore, we need some other action, some other signal that's going to show this is going to be the object of mitzvah, but I'm not doing the mitzvah right now.
Uh-huh. Okay.
You follow?
Right. You kind of your taking is not the sense so much as a bundling together, or you're taking it together.
Yeah, the taking it together at the time of the mitzvah, that's ulekachtem lachem, bayom harishon. If you took it lifnei yom harishon, that's not ulekachtem lachem.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, you need the eget.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Larry, waiting patiently. Please go ahead. Thank you, Benny. Larry, please unmute yourself.
Sorry. What
okay.
is the reason the etrog is not included as part of the eged?
It's a good question.
No,
I'm going to table that question for when we get to etrog.
That's not my real question.
When we get to etrog, we have to get back to that.
But it's very nogea where we are right now, because we don't have the Arba minim together.
Oh, that's true.
And therefore,
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
That's really my question.
You have 3 out of the 4 items. How is that a chatzah shel mitzvah
You
at
have
all?
three.
It's not
3 meaning is
part of a
not
mitzvah.
a 4 is 0. No. That's like a little pregnant. You don't have a mitzvah. What if you had 3 kosher minim? You have garnished.
So according to Rabbi Yehuda,
According to Rabbi Yehuda,
an
for
essential
sure-
element is that there be a bundle.
Yeah.
So that's an action that signifies that this is designated these 3 hadasim, 2 aravot, and 1 lulav as the ones that I will use when I do this mitzvah. And that's good enough. That's what we have to say. And according to the Rabbanan, there's a mitzvah that was performed right now. What was that? Zekeli vanvehu. It's a beautification of the mitzvah object, is itself a mitzvah.
Forgive me, but I really have a problem with that answer.
Well, again, what I think is at play here is the reality that we're trying to understand, why is there a discussion about Dichui Eitzel mitzvot? What mitzvah is there here? You haven't done the mitzvah ever yet. We have these species, these different kinds of branches. And what do you mean Dichui Eitzel mitzvot, right? So the question is, before a korban is offered as a korban, it's already called a korban. How's that? Designated. You are makdish it. Okay. Being makdish an object for a mitzvah is hazmana It's not really a real thing. So is there a series of actions that can signify I'm on the trail to use this as the mitzvah? You're right. It's not the mitzvah object entirely. And you're right. If you picked up the 3 things the next day and not the 4th, not the etrog, there's no mitzvah accomplished. It's 0. It's not halfway. It's not a little bit. It's nothing. True. The question here is, can we say that a component of what's going to be the mitzvah tomorrow already has some kind of a status as, I have to modify it, an object of partial fulfillment of a mitzvah, which absent the other piece is actually 0. That's the whole question. That's what's swirling. And the Rav's, sort of laser-like focus is, look how Rashi formulated this. He talked about an eged, but the eged seems to be like some other discussion. No, because the eged is the question of, is there an object here that is set aside these particular items as the items that I will use among the 4 tomorrow? And the answer is yes. To what extent? Okay, so
Maybe, and this is a total guess on my,
yeah.
this is a total guess. Maybe what it means is that the agate has a special status, that when you have the 3 green minim in it, it is just pending completion,
Okay.
which corresponds with what you were saying, that it's really an integral step in the mitzvah, and therefore
I'm not making it up. I think that's what the Rav is saying.
I hear it. I understand that, but I find that so difficult when we absolutely have learned that you cannot have any kind of mitzvah without completeness, without arba minim.
I hear you. I hear you.
All right, to be continued.
All right, to be continued. Let's do a few more lines together before we say goodbye, just to finish off this oath, because this is already, the next one's, there's one little bit over here. So we'll skip this because this is in brackets like Rabbi Shurkin. So ume'ata nira disvarale l'Rashi, and now it seems that Rashi is of the opinion. Dehain omnam dil rabbanan lo shayach shem lulav shal mitzvah ela mishekidesh alav hayom. Even though it's true, indeed, it is true that according to the Chachamim, not Rabbi Yehuda, but the Chachamim, there's no idea of a lulav shal mitzvah until the onset of the yontif itself. Mikol makom gam l'Rabbanan lo sagi b'zeh shekidesh alav hayom bilvad. For the Chachamim, for the Rabbanan also, the kiddush hayom, where you have a lulav, in your fridge on one shelf, hadassim on another, and a rabbit on another. So now, and you're going to use it tomorrow, but you haven't actually done anything with it. You just kept it in your fridge, and the yontif started. So that's not enough. Ella sarich, rather, what's necessary? Ella tzar gam sheyegad v'yeh alav chalot shem shel hoshana shel mitzvah. Has to have somehow the status now of a name, of being called the hoshana of mitzvah. Remember that the bundle itself is called sometimes the hoshana bundle, even though on the day of Hoshana Rabbah, we actually end up taking a separate bundle, which we call the Hoshanas. Yeah. But the truth is the Hoshanot, the prayer, is the going around. We carry the Dalet Minim. So the bundle itself is already called the Hoshana Shel Mitzvah. The Tarvayu Ba'in, according to the Rabbanan, you need both. Kidesh Hayom ve'eged. You need the sanctity of the day, the onset sanctity, and you need the bundling. Va'af the Rabbanan eged eino elo l'noi ba'alma. Even though Chachamim, they think that this eged is nothing more than a beautification. Mikol makom, nonetheless, you uyan b'mash nera b'zel halan. Go see further along in this sefer, product placement by Rabbi Shurkin for a later section in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, Bedin Eged Belulav, with regard to the Eged of the Lulav, the Yesh Chalot Eged Belulav, Mido Raita Gam Rabbanan. Even the Rabbanan think that when you make the Eged on your Lulav, there's a status deoraita that's being formulated. He says, I explained it in the Rav Soloveitchik's name later. Ella, Shechalot Ze'enim Akevet. This is just it's not essential. If you didn't do it, okay, then you missed out. But it's a
does that make it Hiddur Mitzvah because of that?
It's Hiddur Mitzvah. That is what it is. It's Hiddur Mitzvah.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yes. Rosh Kivad, exactly. V'chol mitzvah tahu mishum Hiddur Mitzvah bilvad. Right there. The whole mitzvah is Hiddur Mitzvah. Aval etzem chalot eged hu kiyum deoraita b'netilat lulav ayin sham. But the main chalot, the main status of the bundle is actually the fulfillment d'oraita of the taking of the bundle itself, i.e., at the time of fulfillment of the mitzvah of the Daled Mina. Yeah. And Larry, you're quite right. The Hoshana Shel mitzvah without the etrog is the eget. That's right. That's why it's called that, because it's the bundling of these objects as a group that gives them a significance. Yeah.
The last word you just read, the Rashi Tevin Al Yadei, what is that for?
Ayin Sham.
Shem.
Ayin Sham.
Ayin Sham. Go see over there. In Kuf Lav. I didn't give you that because it's going to be too hard. Okay, it's 9:00. I don't want to overstay my welcome. We'll resume on Monday. If you're interested, you can pick this up, because here's, what about the timing of the Dichui before Sukkot starts, or Soloveitchik asks, based on this idea. And then down here, the last part of it is the Din Dichui and the Lulav Avodah Zarah. Because we said there's a whole discussion about how maybe with regard to Avodah Zarah, there can also be a repatriation if it was nullified, right? Or not nullified before it was cut, before it was given to the Jew, all different discussions. And then the last one, Ot Hey, is B'dichui Me'ikara Eitzel Mitzvot, about the idea, this we will need regardless, in order to get into Tosfot on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, to understand this section, because he explains what does it mean, Dichui Me'ikara. We've been talking so far about, we have some kind of a mitzvah object, it's good, but then something bad happens to it. Can it be rendered fit again? But Dichui Me'ikara means the object never got off the ground, but then it did. So it was not like it was alive, died, and came alive. It was dead, and then suddenly it came to life and was worthy of being a mitzvah. That's a separate din. And it's also playing, of course, in our Gemara as well about this whole question about Dichui Eitzel Mitzvah. Anyway, that's all we have time for tonight.
What time next Monday? What time?
Monday night, it's going to have to be, I guess, 8:30. I don't think we have another choice, because Mincha Marav is going to be later. Am I right, Ira?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say the Gemara Shir next week will be at 8:30. And until further notice, it'll have to stay 8:30, because I don't know. I don't know what else to do. Otherwise, we can't make a go of it. So 8:30 starting next week, Monday night. We'll resume then. Okay.